Alrighty, guys, welcome back to the show for men. Today we're watching a video called Warning: Why 60% of Men Give Up on Women. This is from the Diary of a CEO. The original video is in the video description if you'd like to watch that through uninterrupted. Cheers.
Between men and women right now?
Women, I think, don't need men as
Okay.
much as they used to. And I think this is in part because of this whole sexual revolution and the pill and feminism and all these things, which has tremendous upsides. I think that women and men are having less sex. They're getting married less. Men's attitude towards women has become a little bit more resentful in certain pockets of the internet. They perceive relationships with the other sex to be disposable more than ever before.
Men view women.
I would say both. And I think in
Okay.
part that's because of dating apps, just the perception of choice.
Okay.
The feeling that if you don't work out, there's another 1,000 people on my phone that I could give a shot to.
I think that's a very true statement. I'll talk about it from the male experience. Yeah, there'll be guys out there, I don't know about another 1,000, but there'll be guys out there who can get lots of options. So if a girl arcs up and all that sort of stuff and isn't fun to be with, they'll drop her and get another one. I'll just jump on the dating app and get another one. I would say this behaviour is predominantly undertaken by women because women have a lot of options on there. All right, it's a seller's market and women are selling. Like, how many times have you guys been on these dating apps talking to these women and all of a sudden the conversation just ends for no real reason? Either it fades off, they just delete you, or even line up a date, they flake on you last minute. It's because there's just too many options, there's too many guys chasing them, and they just discard men. So that's why men get frustrated with it, and that's why men stop putting in a lot of effort. Now, I can tell you an example from my really good friend Larry. Larry's still on there, and I was even speaking to him very recently, and he's having this exact experience. So he lines up dates with women, and the majority of the time he was telling me there's like a 75% flake rate on him. Like, they have a plan and everything lined up, and just before the date, they either delete him because they can't be bothered going anymore, or they got a better option, or whatever it may be. Or before they even get to the date stage, the conversation will be going well, and it just ends. So guys getting annoyed. And guys, that's why I tell you about these experiences of my good friend who's still on there, because he's the everyman, the average man, and he's having a really tough trot of it. And he's not a bad-looking guy. He's tall and he makes good money and all that sort of stuff. It's just that it gets harder and harder as time goes on because women's expectations of men and what they're going to get out of men and the type of men that they're going to get increases. It continues to go up. That's really the main issue here.
I think the equation of a relationship, when we think about the investment it takes for it to work and what you get from it, people now perceive the equation not to be worth it.
Okay, I think there's a lot of great stuff there. So you're like a fully formed adult man, right?
I think so. I hope
Yeah,
so.
yeah. Like you're like a man. You're not like a kid. You're not like a dude in early stages of development. You've got a career. You've got a relationship. You're buying a house. Like, you are an adult.
Yeah.
So if I was an 18-year-old
Yeah.
and I came to you, and let's say I'm your nephew or something like that, and I'm like, Stephen, fully formed adult, handsome man in relationship, I'm struggling to date.
Yeah.
What should I do?
You want me to give you advice? Fuck. I think you should work on yourself.
Okay.
Especially as an 18-year-old man, because I think you need to, especially at that age, create some advantages. And so working on yourself could be learning, reading, going to the gym, building up the ability to provide for someone else and to protect somebody else.
Yeah, that sounds great, doesn't it? So let's see what the solution here is. It's men need to make more and more effort. I think everybody should invest in themselves, but not specifically for the purpose of trying to date. To me, I don't think that sets the right message that you're not enough as is, and you need to go and try and be a huge earner, get super jacked in the gym just for the express purpose of having a shot to meet women. That's a lot of the advice out there. And I question that advice purely on the fact that what do you get at the end of it all? Yeah, there are some good chicks out there, like there are. I'm not saying I'm not an all women kind of guy who labels it across the board. But if you talk about the experiences of men, as the old saying goes, the juice just isn't worth the squeeze, even in the dating phase. But even think about when you get further. So guys, I know that you guys are in my age bracket, over 35, anywhere up to in your 60s. That's what my demographic is sort of on the channel. So you guys would also have been through the whole mill. So you've gone through dating. You've gotten to the engagement phase. Then you've gone to the marriage phase. And a lot of us have also been through divorces, which have caused a lot of damage. And so you start thinking, as a man who's gone back into the dating market, what am I truly going to get? What's the net benefit going to be here? A lot of the time, it's not much. Another thing I want to raise is you never hear the advice being women need to work on themselves. Women need to be making themselves better potential girlfriends or whatever it may be. To men, it's always men need to do more, women need to do the same or less and get more benefit out of men. And that's where that doesn't stack up for me, personally. Even guys who have it all well put together still struggle a lot on dating apps, especially if you don't look a certain way. So yes, being successful is one way. And I'm talking about dating apps. I'm not talking about other ways of meeting people through friends and all that. Generally, they have a little bit of a better chance of working out. But I'm talking about on dating apps cold. You know, guys who may have really good jobs and all that sort of stuff. Still not having much luck out there, or having horrible experiences with women who are nowhere close to even being on their level. So these guys have leveled up. They've gotten good jobs, educated, or done trades, or run their own businesses, whatever it may be, good at saving money, however you define success. You've gotten into better shape, you've lost some weight, maybe you put on some muscle. You're still getting the same result. You might have a little bit more success, but that success is short term and it's fleeting because, as he said, people are very quick to discard one another on a dating app. More specifically, women discard men. Now let's talk about reasons why. I can tell you from my experience, if you don't toe the line and do all the things that women would expect out of the dating process while also offering you not much, then you'll be cut off. So let's talk about that. Going for a walking date or a date that is low effort, low expectations and low cost for you, a lot of the time most women aren't going to go for that. They're going to want some sort of outing and for you to pay for that outing. And as you have more and more experience with women and disappointments, you are less likely to want to go and do that, because even when you have gone and done that in the past, you felt used up and discarded anyway. So you might have gone and spent $100 or $150 on an outing, a meal somewhere that you wouldn't have spent before. All right. And you'll get a message soon after saying, oh, hey, thanks. It was great to catch up with you. However, I don't think it's going to go anywhere from here. Good luck on your search, or whatever, boilerplate message you may get. So guys are like, hang on. So if I don't do much, I don't get much action. I don't get much attention or opportunity. However, if I go and spend more money and do all these things that women say they want, I still don't get anything out of it. So guys are like, well, what are we doing here? That's what it is.
That's kind of really where I'd start. And again, that's biased because that's what I did at 18 years old.
Great.
I actually didn't date. I think I've been on 5 dates in my entire life.
Okay, so let's say I do that.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm like, hey, I'm on this growth journey. And I'm sure you've encountered this, and there are going to be people in the audience who are like, the reason they're watching this podcast is because they're trying to do that. They're still not getting dates, right? Yeah. It's still hard to find a girlfriend. Then what do you have to say to them?
I would assume that the reason it's not working is because they're not in this frame of mind to find love.
And when a dude says, I'm trying to do everything right, what is the most common response that they get, right? So like,
try harder, or like...
Yeah, right? If you kind of like look at Twitter, what you'll find is people will be like, it's impossible to find a good woman. And then like men will be, let's say a dude says that, or a woman says that. It's on both sides. It's impossible to find a good man. And then people won't be like, yeah, it's impossible to find a good man. So maybe some people will be supportive. So you'll have a woman who says it's impossible to find a good man. You know, there are a lot of people who are like, yeah, like men are trash. Fine. And then a lot of...
Let's talk about that narrative, because I cover that a lot over my channels, over my different channels, and even more so on my other G-Man Speaks TV channel, where I'm more just, you know, critiquing TikTok posts from women. But a lot of women will say, I can't find a good man. There are no good men out there. I'm having a hard time of it. But they don't introspect as to why. Now, we all know what that means. The good man's the boring man. The good man's the nice guy. The good man's the guy who's got his life penned down or locked down, so to speak. But he's not exciting. He's not fun. They get bored very quickly. And so the good man, I'm going to translate what a good man is. A good man is the guy who's got everything going for him. He's good looking. He's tall. And other women want him, but he only wants that one particular woman and fully commits to her and keeps the fun and feelings and excitement going forever, like on a roller coaster. And that's just not realistic or maintainable. That's what a good man is. So a good man's a guy who doesn't exist. And that's why they say they can't find one, because he doesn't exist. And the very few that might exist, a lot of them are either A, married, or alternatively playing the field because they're exploiting the situation that they've put themselves in by their hard work and also being born good looking and seeing heaps of women. And they're all chasing the one small percentage of guys.
People will be like, you're not trying hard enough. You're not going to the right places. We as men get that a lot more because there's a societal bias that men don't need help, right? So if you look at like the comparison of scholarships, male-only scholarships versus female-only scholarships, there's about $4.9 billion worth of scholarships given out in the United States from private sources. Female scholarships outside of athletics are way higher than male scholarships. So if you look at athletics, the number is way higher for men. But the really weird thing is that like 60% of people who graduate from college or in college somewhere in there are women. So the people who need more gender-based support are men, but we don't really do that. We're usually like, if a man has a problem, this is a man's problem to solve. And when a man goes out and says, I'm having trouble dating, but what people will say is men will say, work harder, try harder. You know, people will and people will really be nasty about it. They're like, do you not know how to talk to women? Stop being a creep, things like that. And then the other thing that we're really seeing is that there is like this very, very like deep anger, entitlement. There's like this incel movement. There's this like alpha male, beta male kind of thing. And I don't know if you kind of get this, but there's like a deep sense of like anger, right? There's like in men, and I think women feel it too. This is why women are so terrified. This whole thing about, would you rather be in a forest with a bear or a man? Did you hear about this? No. So like people would ask this question on Twitter to women. It's like, would you rather be in a forest with like a bear or a man? And like women feel safer with a wild bear than they do with a man.
I haven't heard anything more nonsensical than that ever. So that was a huge thing a few months ago that was going all over the internet. And that just goes to show you that I think women live in a fantasy land when it comes to the real world. I don't know, this is a meme, it's a bit of a joke. I think some people took it seriously. What, you'd rather be trapped on your own on a hiking trail somewhere with a big grizzly bear chasing you than a man walking past you. Because they say that most men are capable of attacking women and all this sort of trash that was going around. Once again, it highlights why guys don't want to put themselves out there and chase women, because they can be accused of doing certain things. Anyway, it's an interesting comment. Gents, halfway. If you're enjoying the channel, consider subscribing. We're having some good growth lately, and it's great to see all of you come back to watch my videos on a daily basis. So I'm very much appreciating it. Let's continue.
So I think people are picking up on this like existential, and I don't know if that makes sense to you, but there's like an existential like cry coming from men, which can manifest as anger. I think we're also seeing reflections of this like in South Korea with like dropping birth rates, right? Where like men are getting really, really angry. They feel really entitled. And I think this is where it's important to understand a biological difference. And we'll get to what I think is going on. So a woman does not need a man in order to pass her genes along, right? So I mean, like literally, I know it sounds weird, but like if you're a woman, you can just go to a sperm bank and you can get pregnant.
Yeah.
You can just have a child without, you can also argue that it's easier for women to find a man who is willing to impregnate them than it is for a man to find a woman willing to carry their child. But I mean, literally, we live in a society where women can just procreate if they feel like it, and men cannot. So there's a fundamental power balance there. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying it is what it is.
And that goes to show you as well that a lot of relationships are very much transactional, right? And it's to the very much the betterment of the life of women when men don't get a whole lot out of it. Marriage in particular. Have a think about that. So women are saying they don't need men because now they can be artificially inseminated. What does that go to tell you about how women look at men? You're a utility or a means to an end. And any guy who's been in a marriage that hasn't been great or a long-term relationship where you felt like you were being taken advantage of, you will be able to see that and understand that clear as day. What about guys? Just dating apps are full of these women who have been married. They're probably still in their 30s and they've got young kids, 1 year old or 2 years old, and they've gotten divorced and ended up on dating apps. So what does that mean? Mission accomplished. I'm bored. I've achieved what I want to achieve. I'm going to go jump back on the dating apps and find Mr. Perfect. And when you start seeing a lot of that, you really start questioning the long-term benefits and long-term stability of marrying anybody. So guys are like, hang on, the internet's full of all these stories about guys talking about how they got rinsed, are on child support. Their lives are basically far worse what they were before they ever got involved with a particular woman. Hang on, I don't actually want to do that anymore. I'm going to have my guard up. And that's where we're at as well. Guys not mindlessly, or as many guys are still doing it, but guys as mindlessly going through the motions that society has set out for them, i.e. moving in with, getting a girlfriend, you're together for a year or two, then you move in, then you get engaged, then you get married, then you have a kid and buy a big house and happily ever after. And what a lot of guys are starting to really realize on a wider scale is it isn't happily ever after. And if things don't work out and you've got a 40 to 50% chance of it not working out, you are going to be adversely impacted. It is like a life-changing outcome going through that.
So I think what we're starting to see is actually like a mass extinction event. We are seeing natural selection for a group of men who have no options. Many years ago, I was a loser, and the world that we lived in necessitated my entry into third spaces. I had trouble talking to girls, but I was forced into college. When I got my first job, it was serving ice cream. I was forced to interact with girls. I was active in a summer camp where I met girls, was forced to talk to girls. So I sucked at talking to girls, but the world that I lived in was structured so that I still had to talk to girls. I had no option to retreat from interaction and painful interaction with the opposite sex. I think literally what we're seeing, because all this stuff started to get really bad during COVID. So what happened in COVID was actually like a natural selection event.
I think it's been happening a lot longer than that. But what's the message here? Just continue to be having a horrible experience at the expense of your mental health and erosion of your self-worth as a man. Because guys going on dating apps and being rejected and going out on dates with women and then being discarded, it has an impact. So how much can men put up with that? I'm not saying all men experience that. Some guys have a great time on there. As I said, it wouldn't be a high percentage. But the vast majority of men have probably had enough of it. And I think it's dating apps and technology that have made it a lot worse. So not just COVID.
But it wasn't a natural selection event about life and death. That's what people think natural selection is. What happened during COVID, sure, a lot of people died and that's bad. But the post-COVID world, some people were able to adapt to it and some people are not. We're seeing a spike in social anxiety. Now I can work from home. Now I have pornography. Now I have all this stuff going on to where I'm not forced to learn how to interact with women. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
So now you can live your whole life at home. And I think what's starting to happen is literally natural selection. And the way that natural selection works is people think it's like, oh, if natural selection means I'm weak and someone is strong. That's not technically correct. Natural selection is you were made a certain way, someone else is made a different way, and then the environment changes. Which one of these two is suited to, it's not even adaptation because all the adaptations have been made. And I think the best example of this is like literally Darwin's finches. So you've got like, one finch that has like a hard beak that can crack a nut. You've got another finch that has a very sharp beak that can get like a bug out of like a cactus, like that has these very like tight flowers. And so if something happens and all the cacti die out, the birds that rely on the cacti bugs will start to die out too. They don't know how to procreate in this world anymore.
Mate, this guy's getting way too scientific about it. The reality is, this is what's going on. Generally, men were looked at to provide resources, being money and security, and making sure that women had those things to get through their life to a higher standard, because if they didn't. All right, so you would have thought about maybe how a spinster would have ended up, maybe 30 or 40 years ago, before the advent of technology and before women were more motivated to go and have careers, higher education, and really chase the bag. Their life probably wouldn't turn out great because they needed a man, all right? They needed a man for strength and support and all that stuff in their life. So now you got women now who have very much invested into their education. Nothing wrong with that. I think it's good. Going out, making really good money. But the issue here is they're saying there are not enough marriageable men out there, or what do they say? Economically attractive men, i.e. he doesn't make more money than me. But there's a certain cap that people get up to in their earnings, where how many people are out there who could make, say some of these women could make six figures, 200, 300,000, very successful people. How many men are out there that are also single, that are also ticking all the boxes, that make that money? This is what it is. It's completely controlled by women. So that's why men get completely disillusioned with it, because it isn't about men giving up or not trying or being socially awkward or having no skills of women. And so women want more and more out of men, and not many men can provide what they want. And women are happy to sit on the sidelines and wait for that man who's never going to come along. Now, I'm talking about women here who also achieved a high status in society. Think about all the videos I've shown and talked about over the years, or over the last 18 months since I've had these channels, where you got women who have done nothing with their lives demanding that sort of output from men. Otherwise, they're not interested in them. So there's been a complete inflation there. And men are expected to provide a whole vast list of benefits where the benefit for men hasn't changed. All right, it's probably become less.
And I think what we're seeing with like all these alphas, betas, incels, what we're seeing in South Korea is there is a whole generation of men that is like, we are literally watching them die out in real time. Because we've got 32-year-olds, 35-year-olds who do not have children, do not know how they're going to ever have children. And this is where, like, I know this sounds bizarre, but so that's actually happening. That's not bizarre. That's birth rate in South Korea is like 0.7. So there's a bunch of men who will never pass on their genes in the alpha male, beta male, whatever, like, in that kind of language, they talk a lot about like procreation and legacy and stuff like that. But I almost wonder, is there a mechanism in a human being that if your genes know they're dying out, what would they trigger in your mind? Right? And I think what they would trigger is exactly what we're seeing. This like existential panic, angst, even aggression, entitlement. Because if these men do not behave in this way, they're literally going to die out. So what we see in this post-COVID world is that people like maybe you or me who were like losers and didn't know how to talk to chicks in high school, we were forced into social interaction where we basically like, that's where we developed in order to, so that we could talk to girls. But
so what he's not understanding is the guys like him, I wouldn't call him a loser. He seems very accomplished. I think he's very educated, has a very big channel, runs businesses, consulting, all that sort of stuff, with people that want to get his help. This guy is not a loser, and he was always on the track to be successful because obviously he was focusing on his education. What happens with these kind of guys is they finally make it in their life, and then women start wanting them. And so he thinks he's trying to say it's all about learning how to talk and not being socially anxious and all that sort of stuff, which does help. But it's about this guy's made it in life. He's attractive because he can offer a woman a really good standard of life. And he's a trophy because this guy I would suspect he'd be quite wealthy. And he's everywhere at the moment, this guy. He's built up a huge channel and he's all over these podcasts and everything like that. So this guy's in the probably top 1%er in terms of earning and success. Not from the looks. Those looks and all that sort of stuff, that starts to matter less the older the women get. This guy would probably be in his 30s. He's probably married and all that. Who knows? He probably didn't do all the dating thing. But what I'm trying to say is these guys get more and more attention and luck or opportunities, so to speak, with women, the more they can demonstrate they've got something they want, which is security.
In this post-COVID world, all those spaces are gone. There's no forcible interaction. So then there are some people for whom it's natural to talk to girls. And that's why we see this dichotomy where it's almost like, some people just put yourself out there, just work on yourself and things will work out. And then there are a lot of other people who are like, that's not working. And I imagine if you went back 200 years, went back to the Galapagos Islands and you took Darwin's finches and you put them on Twitter, you would see exactly what we're seeing. Some people are like, oh, you have trouble getting bugs? Just crack a nut. Just get better at cracking nuts. But they have something in their makeup, something in their attachment style, something in their tendency for social anxiety, something in their neuroticism, something in their circumstances, something in their support structure that allows them to put forth effort and succeed. And then there are these other people over here who will go to therapy, who will work on themselves professionally, who will show up on dating apps. And because of the shape of their face, which cannot be fundamentally altered, or some other thing which they're not even aware of. They grew up with a certain attachment style that they're not aware of. They grew up on the spectrum, and their capacity to make eye contact and emotional connections is very difficult. So there's this whole crop of people who I think are trying really hard. I don't think they're losers. I don't think they're pathetic or anything like that. I think there's something about the architecture of how these people are built so that standard advice does not apply to them.
So I get what he's saying, right? There are people without anything. It's out of their control. It's been the cards have been dealt with at birth. They're having a hard time. But if you look back in history, these men could have had access to women on a similar footing as them. That's sort of what I'm trying to say here is, if you didn't look good or, you were short and you were fat, you could probably get a short and fat woman. Now that opportunity is very, very hard to get for these guys because they're not going to get looked at on dating apps. And that's the main way people meet each other. So I fully understand what he's saying. It makes sense to me. It doesn't make sense in practice, in the real world, comparing it to how these people would have been able to have relationships in the past. You'd see, women who weren't attractive with men who weren't attractive, people who are overweight with a wife that was overweight. That one for one isn't really happening anymore. It'd be very, very rare as women, as I said, have an inflated sense of what they can get on the market because technology has made them incredibly picky to their own detriment. And that's why you get more and more single women. I think it's 45% of women are now single. And rising.
And what I feel when I sit with these people is someone who is dying out. That's what it feels like to sit with. This person's life, they're not living a life. They're in a slow, protracted process of dying. And when you are in a slow, protracted, go on a date, or maybe you're swiping.
Just moving it on a little bit for this last segment because he's just sort of going on down the rabbit hole.
On Tinder and no one's really answering or whatever. You just have these hours in the day where there's nothing going on. You're not living for anything. So you might as well jerk off.
I mean, there's a lot that I'm thinking about. The first is, if we go back up to your point about this being a bit of an extinction event, it poses a question about what do you do about that? you said also people are trying to implement the advice, but it's not working. Now, does that mean that that's a question of like motivation, discipline? Is it bad advice? What do we do there? And the third, I guess, question that comes to mind is, does society have a responsibility to intervene in some way to correct this?
So I think, does society have a responsibility? I don't think that is a real thing. So I have never seen society take a responsibility. I don't think society can take a responsibility, right? So if like how do I get society? Like, who do I talk to?
But if you think about other people that are in marginalized groups, society intervenes to make the
Who is
world,
society?
the governments and the way that we make our laws.
All right, look, they're going down a path of conversation here. Actually, I don't think this is very helpful. What's happened is it's all lopsided now, and this is my view, right? You guys can call me a crack addict or whatever you want. We've already seen now, you got these apps here, okay, AI chatbots and things like that, that people who are not having a good time meeting women, they're leaning towards those and building connections with technology. They're making robots that men can, get the red hot dim sim just unloaded on those, that are more and more lifelike as time goes on. Which I don't think is anything really different. I mean, it gets a lot of shaming. It is a little bit probably abnormal for society. But if you really think about it, women have been using technology for years to replace men. What's in the drawer of a lot of single women? It's a little machine, if you know what I'm saying. A little machine that gets them off, and then they say, well, I don't need a man. So I don't know, guys. I think it's going to a point where what's the government going to do? I don't know. People say, oh, society needs to help and the government needs... What's the government going to do about this? You can't change outrageous expectations out of women, and men just going, you know what, I'm sick of this more or less humiliation. Anyway, that's enough for me, guys. I'll get off my soapbox. Thank you very much for watching today, and I'll see you in the next video.